On this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast, I give you an update of what's been going on. We talk about the hurricane that happened, how it kind of affected what's been going on here. I talk about a recent tour I did with my friend James Tucker and an epic show of epic proportions that I still have a hard time putting into words. Um, but yeah, thanks so much for being here. Excited to be back. Let's go. So, I haven't been posting a whole lot I don't think at all in October. We had a bunch of stuff happen, and I just kind of wanted to give you guys an update on what's been going on. So, originally, I think the last episode I posted was an audio only episode, I want to say. And did some talking about some stuff, was very excited about the next week. My original plan was the next week after that episode, which was the last Thursday in September. I was supposed to be traveling with my good friend Daniel Langdale, and we were supposed to be driving down to Dallas for a conference. We were supposed to be driving to shoot a conference, shoot some video for a conference, and I was going to have some meetings and all that kind of stuff. I had a couple lunches and breakfasts set up while I was down there. And that was really cool, and I was excited to do that. But day came. The day before, we decided we were going to go through and do some getting our rental car. The plan was to drive down. We weren't going to fly, so we were going to get our rental car, and we were going to go ahead and get everything packed up, ready to go, and then head out the next morning. Day before, we go and try to get a rental car, and they're like, yeah, this storm's coming through. We can't give you a car to drive to Texas. Our insurance will not allow us to rent you a car to drive from South Carolina to Texas because of this storm that was coming in. And at the time, I think it was just a storm and maybe had progressed to a hurricane at that point, but I don't think we expected it to do what it did. The next day, the project ended up getting canceled because of the storm. We were like, okay, well, that kind of sucks, but we'll figure it out. My original plan that Thursday had been while we were on the road, me and Daniel were going to do an in the car episode of the podcast, and I thought that was going to be really interesting. So I had to rethink some stuff and kind of redo a couple things. So I was like, well, I'll miss a week. It'll be fine. I'll come back the next week and we'll be all good. What I didn't know is Thursday night, for Hurricane Helene to hit the coast of, Florida, the Panhandle, and then go fully up the coast, and it ended up sitting right around the area where I live, which is the Travelers Rest area, upstate of South Carolina and western North Carolina. We're talking like Asheville, Hendersonville area of North Carolina, a lot of the mountain regions. And so, yeah, we weren't really expecting that to hit. And we're not really prepared for a hurricane here because, we are in the middle of the country. We're not really, I think the quickest I could get to the coast is like a 3.5-4 hour drive, potentially, from where I live. And so we're not really thinking anything about a hurricane, and yet a hurricane hits and just sits over where we live. So yeah, we got decimated by this hurricane. Half of my city in Greenville, South Carolina, was flooded significantly. And there was a lot of, there were trees down everywhere, lots of houses, cars getting crushed. There was a lot of stuff that went, terrible in that time frame around here. And we ended up being without power for, I believe, about a week. I think it ended up being like 5 or 6 days, no power. no internet for longer than that, but no power for 5 or 6 days, and, I have a 3-year-old. So, no power, no internet for 5 or 6 days, we'll say, with a 3-year-old is also kinda tough because we have to think about, like, what is he gonna eat? How are we gonna get, clean water, that kinda stuff, and, even down to how are we gonna shower, we gotta keep him entertained. Um, and so we did a lot of reading by candlelight and a lot of games outside and things like that. But we got through it. It was a little bit of a madhouse. People got really crazy, especially here for a while. Um, for the first like 2 or 3 days, people were going nuts and fighting over gas and milk and you know, luckily I had some cash, so we didn't have to worry about the grocery stores we went to having internet access or power so that we could, get a couple things here and there. Fortunately, a lot of the grocery stores ended up getting a decent some power. We found a couple of them with power, so we were able to get, a couple of drinks here and there or some water. But for the most part, like we didn't have power at our house, so it's not really doesn't really make sense to get things we need to keep in a fridge that are just going to go bad by the time that you know you could actually use them. Also, we didn't have power to cook, so we ended up using a lot of our. I have a gas powered grill, so we ended up making a lot of stuff on the grill. We made a pizza on the grill, did hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff the first day, just to kind of get cook what we could cook from the freezer before it went bad. And then we made some soups and some rice and beans and stuff like that and kind of just ate that way. And then by the time we got through that, some restaurants started opening back up, so we were able to get some food from those places. So yeah, it was tough. It was the tough couple of weeks dealing with that. Not to mention the stuff that's still happening in the Asheville area. I mentioned, it kind of hit our area, and it actually primarily stopped. The hurricane just kind of stopped and sat over the Western North Carolina area. We got like the edge of it, or like a good portion of it here where I live, but it really sat over like the Asheville area. And since they're in the mountains, they are not ready for that kind of stuff. And so, like, half that mountain was flooded. The streets were just falling apart. There were some bunch of mudslides that took out sections of the highway, and a lot of people got isolated. The rivers kind of ran over and took out sections of the road and made it to where people couldn't get to each other. And so, yeah, and they're still kind of dealing with some of that stuff up there. I think as of my friend that lives in Asheville, who's still up there right now, said that I think as of this week, they still didn't have fully clean water. And the hurricane happened at the end of September, and we are in, as of time of recording, beginning of November, and they still don't have clean water. It's crazy. And if anybody wants to like donate or donate towards the relief efforts that are going on up there, I'll have some links in the description where if you want to go check that out, feel free to donate. There's a lot of really good people doing really great things up there. We've been sending, like the Greenville area has been sending a bunch of different people up to help and take water and help with relief efforts. People with chainsaws going to cut people out of their houses and um, get people into safer spaces. They've been helivacing people in and out and helivacing supplies in. Um, so it's been a wild couple of days. So that's like the first thing that happened. Uh, the next thing that happened, and another reason why I couldn't really do the podcast very often, was more of a positive thing actually. Um, I had the opportunity to go play with a friend of mine named James Tucker, who is I would call him more of like an Americana folk artist, but and definitely country um leaning. I produce I think I've produced most of his music at this point. The majority I've had a hand in some way, whether it's tracking, production, mix, master. I think I've had a hand in almost every song except for 2. And, so James is a good friend. James goes to church with me. Some of his bandmates have been my friends for a very long time, close friends, namely Jeremy, the drummer, Jeremy Bingham. Me and him have been friends. We play Dungeons and Dragons together, and he's a part of my Dungeons and Dragons group. And so that's been really cool to kind of get to know him. And so James talked to me, knew I knew his songs really well, and got an offer to do a leg of a run with an artist named Dylan Gossett, who is a kind of in that same like alt country thing. Kind of James is, I would consider James in that, space. The Tyler Childers space, the Morgan Wallen space, the Ernest space, those kind of artists. It's a pretty cool little corner of country music that they're a part of. And so James is unsigned. James is just doing the thing on his own. Dylan is signed to Big Loud, which is one of the larger country labels. Big Loud has artists like Hardy and Miranda Lambert, and I believe Riley Green also is signed to there, and Morgan Wallen is also signed to Big Loud, and Ernest, and a couple of others that I'm not remembering right now. But he had a string of shows with Dylan coming up, and then a really big country music festival here in Greenville that we got asked to play the main stage for. So we were opening the main stage there, which was a massive stage. And so that was probably about the other 2 weeks of October was me doing that, which is nuts. And so the first couple weeks was me dealing with the hurricane stuff and reeling from that. And then there was probably like half a week where I was catching up with projects and making sure I was getting podcasts and stuff out. But then immediately after that, it was, time to go on tour for a couple weeks, which was cool. I got to stay with Josh actually, and him and his now wife, who Josh got married recently. Yay, Josh. Got married recently, and while I was in Nashville for one of the shows, I got to stay with Josh and we got to hang out. We got dinner with a friend of the podcast, Greg, who's been on in the past, and I want to have him on again. So like I said, I was in Nashville, and that's where I stayed with Josh at. And I was in Nashville because we played, and this is like a bucket list thing for me, but we played the Ryman Auditorium, which, if you don't know what the Ryman is, it's a venue in Nashville, and it is like people call it the Mother Church. It's literally an old church. It's a theater-sized venue. I think 23 to 2,500, cap venue. Really, really, really big for like as far as what I've played. I think the largest crowd I've ever played to is like 3,000 or 4,000 in Germany, but this in the States would probably be the biggest crowd I've ever played to. And not to mention, this is the Ryman, which in Southern culture and country music is a massive deal. It's a legendary venue, one of the most legendary venues. It's equivalent to, like, I would say, the Royal Albert Hall in the UK. It's like an equivalent, legendary status of venue. It's where the Grand Ole Opry originally was. Elvis played there. Original Gaithers played there. Hank Williams played there. And Hank Williams Sr. And yeah, it's everybody who's anybody in like rock and roll, country music, blues music, even some pop artists and singer-songwriter artists have done, shows there and played there, and it is absolutely a beautiful sounding venue. It's a beautiful looking venue. So we got to play there, and that was really cool. And we played to a sold out crowd, which was also nuts. Um, and at the end of the show, we played our set, and that was nerve wracking as all get out, but it was awesome. But at the end of our set, we played, and we got a standing ovation. Um, the Ryman is a seated venue, so it's a seated theater venue, all seated, and which is kind of strange, but also you kind of don't see anybody because the lights are in your face, so it's kind of hard to tell. But it is very much a listening crowd. So like you are there to showcase what you do in the best way possible. And the fact that we got a standing ovation from a that kind of crowd is just very, very, very cool. Great for James. It was a cool experience for me to get to mark that one off the bucket list, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, the last couple of weeks have been that, and then you know trying to play catch up with projects. So I am excited to finally be back doing the podcast on the regular again. I have some guests lined up and episodes lined up that I'm very excited about over the next couple weeks. We are kind of getting into holidays, so some of these are going to be a little more holiday specific episodes, but we'll see how that goes. But Josh is still getting Josh got a job at a Guitar Center while he's getting settled in Nashville, and so his schedule's a little bit wonky right now. Excited for him and Maddie to, their wedding went well and they got married and now they're doing their thing in Nashville. So excited for them, but hopefully we'll get Josh back on for a holiday specific episode where we can just chat. And yeah, so just wanted to kind of give you an update of what's been going on with me and the reason that I haven't been able to, do the podcast regularly and be a little more consistent. I mean, even my YouTube content has also kind of slowed down a little bit with that. I actually just posted a video today at time of recording, posted a video today. If you want to go check that out, I'll put that on a card up here somewhere. If you're watching the YouTube version, if not, I'll link in the description if you want to check it out on the audio only version. But yeah, I am kind of starting to get back into that stuff. You're going to see some more content output from the podcast as well. Very excited about all of that stuff. Yeah, and I'm just excited to be back doing some things and hopefully having a little bit more normalcy with, everything that's been going on lately and all that stuff. We're about to do some house renovations. That's going to get fun. So you might start seeing in the camera shot, you might start seeing some of that, or you might start getting some like weird location based podcast episodes where I'm just like in a spot or, at the studio at 101 at Studio 101, doing some episodes because I can't do them here. So yeah, there will be a little bit of that. I also have some episodes from other podcasts that I'm going to put on this feed as well, that I think you guys will enjoy. So that I have been a part of, not just random podcasts. That wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, I think that's everything. I updated you, talked about the weather stuff and the hurricane, talked about the tour and playing at the Ryman, and that was super fun. And yeah, man, I think that's everything. I'm very excited about coming into the end of the year. I am very tired, and I've been doing a whole lot, while also trying to get a 3-year-old boy to listen and behave and sleep in his own room because he's a big boy now, and I'm feeling like an old man. But yeah, I'm definitely feeling the tired from a lot of that stuff going on. Not to mention the last 4 weeks have been kind of hectic. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. We'll call this the end of the podcast. We'll have a normal, longer, long form podcast back up next week. And once again, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe if this is the first time you are checking this out. This is a very abnormal episode. This is more update for the people that are regularly listening. But hey, thanks so much for checking it out. If it is your first time, if you're a regular listener, thank you so much for listening and following and doing all of the things, interacting and all of that. I'm super appreciative for this little show that I get to do for everyone every week. And yeah, glad to be back. Glad to be back here doing this thing. Yeah, love you, mean it. We will see you in the next one. Subscribe while you're here. Later. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. If you could take the time to like, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio platform, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed and also leave a rating and a review. It helps the show get out to new people, and we're trying to grow every single week. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast, and we'll see you next week.